Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life peeps, Justin here, and Abby is not. I have just snuck away to have some man time. So today in my man time, I'm bringing two guests. Not just one, but two guests that I absolutely think are incredible men that I think everyone should know, and that's why they're on here. Their names are Daniel and Robby. Hi.
Hello. Are you going to say our last names? I'm just kidding.
Daniel Stafford and Robby Switzer.
Dude, that was one of my hesitations about coming on, is because I'm like, I never know when Justin's done giving an intro. When am I going to talk? That was a perfect example. Like, do I say hi now or do I wait?
I loved how you guys just stared at me. You're like, okay. Daniel and Robby, here's a little background for everyone. And guys, feel free to jump in at any time. But Daniel and Robby I've had the gift of meeting with them in my office for how many years now, guys? Do you know?
It's been over 2 years, 2.5 years.
2.5 years?
Over 3.
What?
Whoa.
It's been a while.
Really? You guys have been meeting with me that long?
I think so.
I really bamboozled you guys, didn't I?
We're still getting tricked every week.
So Daniel and Robby, Daniel, originally you were the one that reached out to me, right?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, and you were kind of like, I think I have problems, maybe. I don't know. I think it was like you were kind of sure, but not sure, if that's what I remember right about it.
I don't even think I said I had problems, dude. Here's what I said. I was like, I'm crushing it at all these areas of life. I'm building a business. I want to also be a good dad and a good father, or a good husband. Can you help me with that? And you're like, sure, we'll meet. We'll dive into the deep end. I had no idea what to expect. But that's how I intro myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm crushing it as an entrepreneur, like killing
that's
life.
True. You did.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, well, this guy doesn't know yet. It was
was very obvious our first call. You put me right in my place.
But Daniel and Robby, they have an e-commerce business called Shopanova. Yeah. Do you guys want to tell people just a little bit about what that is before we get too deep into this?
Yeah. Basically
Daniel points to Robby. Go ahead, Robby. I don't want to do this.
We provide marketing and sales services to e-commerce brands. So right now what that looks like is us running their paid media campaigns. And we manage their ad spend budget and hopefully make them more money than we're spending and help them grow their business.
Fingers crossed.
Or we lose them lots of the money and they waste it on marketing.
I love the name Shopanova. It just sounds so like boom, explosive. It sounds like a comet just exploding into your face.
Reminds me of that song, Supernova.
That's what
Champagne Supernova. That's actually where we got it.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. So I think our branding agency was like a combination between Shopify, which is an e-commerce platform, and Fashion Nova,
which is an e-commerce brand.
Which is a brand. And it was like, yeah. Anyway,
it's like Shopanova it is. Yeah.
Clever play on words.
Yeah, very clever. Well, these two, part of why they're here is that, I wanted to introduce the Connected Life listeners to these two because I have watched you guys be some of the most incredible examples of masculinity and fathering and being businessmen as a whole. Like, not because you guys got it all together. I mean, you guys have been messy. I'm like, I'm not going to bullshit anybody out there. You guys have had your problems.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, we have. But I think there is just some beautiful ways that you guys have expressed your masculinity in the midst of your messiness. And got connected to your hearts? Because there's ways that you guys were radically disconnected from yourself, I think, and very passive in certain approaches to life. Am I overstepping my bounds on saying that?
No, dude, you can say whatever you want. That's treading lightly even.
Yeah. Green light to share it all.
Yeah. But what I saw you guys do is that you guys had such a tender heart of not only to have input put into your life, but also to grow, to develop, to be corrected in so many ways. And I watched that at every phase of your growth journey, you applied it to all parts of your life. If we applied it to one part, if it was business, it ended up getting applied to family. If it was applied to family, it was applied to business. If it was applied to yourself, it didn't just get compartmentalized into one arena. You guys have looked to actually impart everything that you're growing into to the world around you. And I've watched a lot of sacrificial actions, not only in the way that you've sacrificed for people outside of you, but the way that you've sacrificed for each other. There's something you guys are, you're both co-CEOs. Is that how you guys have structured your world?
I think that's what you call it. Yeah. We don't know what to call it, but we share the CEO role.
Yeah. Co-founders and CEO. It's always fun to say I'm the CEO. But he says it too. So.
I do say it, yeah.
You're talking to the CEOs.
It's only when I'm trying to flex on my dad. I'll say, I'm the CEO, Dad.
And the other unique thing about you guys is that you're brother-in-laws.
Yep. Yeah. So Robby actually married my little sister before our journey on this business began.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a weird thing to be like, I'm going to start into business with the guy who's making babies with my sister?
Yeah.
He was a little bit of a driving force behind it.
Yeah. I'm the one that told him to start making babies.
You're like, make this happen. You guys get together. Did you actually tee them up? Daniel, did you tee up Robby and
I think I was a big pusher of it because me and Robby's older brother were like best friends and hung out a lot. We fished together. And then Robby came up and started visiting, and I really liked Robby, and I knew my little sister really liked him as well. And so we'd always have these get-togethers, where they were both around, and one thing led to another.
We almost got to rewind and just tell the whole story.
Give us a little bit of your guys' background, because I think that that's super unique. As we get into today, also, I want to make a side note. We're going to get into really exploring their connection to themselves, to their company, and to their family, and how they are able to manage all those roles, and in a unique way sometimes.
Yeah, cool. So I think it's important as people, if people expect to learn anything from us or our journey, it's important to understand kind of where we came from and a little bit of where we are now, because I feel like our meetings with you has just really helped us live really rich lives. And, by a lot of people's standards, we are doing well. It's pretty cool. The story will make sense when we get there, but we grew up, doing commercial fishing and construction and all this manual labor in a small town in Homer, Alaska. It's like 5,000 people. And so to take those two people from that world and say, 5-6 years later, they're going to be sharing the role of the CEO of a marketing company. They have like 40 employees. They've generated their clients over $100 million in revenue. Like it's crazy. Like how did we go from fishing to that? And now we're just blessed to have influence, and we're able to speak into our employees' lives and clients' lives, and even people that are just aware of our brand and some of our story. But it kind of started with Daniel really growing up in Homer, Alaska. And why don't you take off that part?
Yeah. So I grew up in this small town of Alaska and was born and raised here. I grew up commercial fishing with my dad, who actually grew up fishing with his dad. So it's kind of this generational thing. And my dad absolutely loved it, was super good at it, super passionate about it. Yeah. Anyways, that's the environment I grew up in, was commercial fishing. I went out on the boat for the first time when I was like 3 years old. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was 10, I was like a full-time deckhand, which is pretty crazy because for those of you that don't know what commercial fishing is, it's like pretty intense work where you're like,
well, you were on, it's like Deadliest Catch, right?
Yeah. I was on the TV show It was a spin-off of it though. It wasn't like crabbing and getting crab out. It was fishing herring, which was a lot safer. They still made it like dramatized it and stuff, but it wasn't like the big crab boats.
Same world though. Yeah.
Same type of world. Yeah. Where you're out, it gets really rough. It gets nasty. There's a lot of sketchy situations you're in with big waves and having the net out and getting snagged up on the bottom and having to get off. So by the time I was 10 though, I was a full-time crewman, and that consists of like getting up at like 4 a.m. Right. And I think my dad would actually let me sleep in the first few years. I think I'd get up at like 6 and then fish till like 10 p.m. and then redo that over and over again all summer, which was awesome as like a 10-year-old though, because I also got paid like a full crew share. So at the end of the summer, I'd make like 20 grand, which as a 10-year-old, you're just like,
you're so rich. You're rich.
You can buy so many toys for $10,000.
And then, at like when you're 18 years old, you had enough money to like build your first house. And that was kind of like the bachelor pad, which is kind of where our paths started to cross a little bit.
So
Daniel, this cool, commercial fisherman. It was really this, work hard, play hard lifestyle, especially when you get into like 18 to early 20s. It was like you go out, you make all this money for a few months, and then you can go surf in Indonesia or Thailand and do all these fun things and buy these fun toys. And my brother was fishing with him at the time, on his dad's boat. And I eventually started coming up to fish as well. And so there's just lots of hanging out, which is kind of how I met his sister, how I met Daniel. And eventually, fell in love with Brittany on all these adventures. And I guess where my part comes in is I entered into this world with much less experience than Daniel. And, I took on $300,000 worth of debt, like literally on our honeymoon, got the call from mom. He's like, hey, we have a nice.
Whoa. So they're on their honeymoon and this is totally my dad. He calls them up. He's like, hey, there's a boat for sale. You guys want it? And I don't even know if you guys have even talked about getting into fishing or like if you're planning on it. But
not really. I mean, I'd fished for a couple years before that and was like starting to get the groove of it, but definitely didn't feel equipped to run a boat. And I remember
this feels like something my dad would do.
I was like, well, I don't know much about engines, and what if it breaks down and I'm like out on the ocean, like with your daughter, like out in the middle of nowhere. And he goes, well, can you change the oil? I'm like, yeah. He goes, if you can change the oil, you can run a gill netter. All right, let's do it.
All right, let's drop 300 grand. Let's go.
So we did it, and we were actually pretty good at it for a while.
I would have felt terrified, like to be like, I'm $300,000 in debt all of a sudden. Okay, this is weird.
Yeah, and I mean, it was scary, but that part was kind of exciting too. I think I'm a quick learner, and that has served me well in my life for a long time. Always did well in like sports and in school and stuff. And so we actually did pretty good. And I actually enjoyed fishing, especially when it was me and Brittany. But where the tone really started to shift for me is like when Brittany got pregnant, which happened the first year we were out there. So
that happened on the boat, bro.
We were buddies on that boat.
So anyways, and then it was like, instead of us
newlyweds on a gill netter, and that's what happened.
That's so hot. A gill netter.
Boatload of fish.
instead of like
Robbie's like, shut up. I just want to tell my story. I'm just moving over this.
I'm going to actually show this podcast to my mom too. Just,
All right. I'll keep moving then. Well, but it was like, instead of me and her going out and fishing together and me and her against the world and doing all these crazy fun things, it was a big adventure. It was now me going out with a deckhand and saying goodbye to Brittany and our new baby daughter, Eleanor. And I was just like, not about it anymore. It was not nearly as much fun. And, about the same time, I got married a little bit before you, Daniel.
Yeah, I got married like 6 or 8 months later. It wasn't.
How old were you guys when you got married?
23.
Daniel was 23.
Yeah, 22.
22.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were pretty young.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got married just after they did. And I was starting to have the similar journey because Sammy actually moved up to Alaska.
Speaking of your wife, Samantha.
Yeah, my wife, Samantha, sorry. And then she was just hanging out by herself all summer while I went fishing. And then we got married that fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wait, is that how it happened?
Well,
okay, Grandpa, how did it go?
What you felt, you got to be the.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for keeping me on track. This is what Robby does. So yeah, I had the very similar feelings though of like, all of a sudden I'm married. We have a baby on our way. I'm like, oh, it's all high stakes all of a sudden. I have to build my own business. I have to provide for my family now. The only way I knew how to do that was the same thing. Go out and like get in massive amounts of debt, buy a fishing boat. And that's what we're going to do for the summers is like fish for the summers and then do what we wanted like fall and winters. But do you want me to keep going? Or you want,
yeah.
Okay.
Take her home.
Yeah. So we went into all this debt, spent a lot more money getting the boat all up and running, going. And that was my first time like having that level of like ownership over something like a startup business, as I would call it.
Yeah.
And it like way more scary and stressful than I thought it would be like once I was plunged into it, because it's like, oh, I have to make this work now was what it felt like.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I have all this debt. I have a new wife. I have a baby on the way. I can't like fail this summer because then what am I going to do? That's a lot of the feelings going into it. So we take off, kiss my wife goodbye, who was pregnant at the time, like 8 months pregnant, basically. She was set to have a baby like halfway through the salmon season. We go out, we start catching a lot of fish, doing really well. And I grew up doing it, so it came really naturally to me.
It was really good.
I crushed it. Anyway, doing really good. And all of a sudden we were heading back to town. I was actually going to pick up my wife, and she was 9 months pregnant this time. It was like 2 weeks before her due date. And I was heading back to pick her up, and we were about an hour from town, and the sea started getting really rough. And they were right on the stern of the boat, meaning they're on the back of the boat. And they kept getting bigger and bigger. And I wasn't too worried about it. The boat felt fine. We were almost there. So I was like, oh, we'll just keep going. And we had our fish hold was like partially full of fish, only about a third of the way full. So a big wave all of a sudden caught us, and we surfed down the front, and it turned us really sharp to the left, and it just rolled over in like one swift motion. And this is like a 45-foot boat, like with cabin and living, it's a pretty big boat.
Right. This isn't anything small. This isn't like I'm in a little like putter fishing boat. This is huge.
Totally. Because when people hear that you like rolled a boat, they're like, yeah.
What was the cost of that boat?
That boat was like right around $325,000.
So $325,000 boat. This is an enormous boat.
Yeah, it's a big boat. And anyways, we're all sitting in the cabin, and we all look at each other and kind of have that oh shit moment, like everything
as it was turning over.
Like we all locked eyes for a sec because we knew it wasn't coming back. And so I was on the uphill side. I pulled the window open and like scrambled out. It was kind of every man for himself at that point. And I stayed dry the whole time and walked over the boat.
You're screaming, save yourselves. And out you go. Thanks, Captain.
The worst captain ever.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
But anyways, another guy followed me out, and I walked across, and I luckily had my cell phone in my pocket. And I was able to call my dad because they're close enough to town. He was about a mile away, and he came racing over on a little boat. And I was just standing on the bottom waiting for everyone else to pop up. One guy followed me out the window. 2 guys had to go out the door. But one guy actually got trapped inside.
Oh, God.
The door slammed on him from the water pressure, and the boat was filling up. He had like a Titanic moment where he like took one last gasp of air at the top and then like held his breath and went, and the door did open up for him. But it seemed like forever, dude. We were waiting for the last guy.
He must have been shitting himself.
Oh, dude, he was. He still is.
Yeah, he's still traumatized from that.
Yeah, total. Well, yeah, one of the guys, so the guy right before him was squirming through the door, and it slammed on his legs and pulled his pants off, and he was able to squirm through still. And Pat just saw it shut, and he's like, dude, I can't even budge that thing at all. It was just so much pressure. And then like once it equalized out, thank God the door opened, and he was able to swim up and pop out. So anyways, all that to say, like that high stakes season, just got married, have a baby on the way, got to make this work. And then all of a sudden it was all upside down. I was just standing there and just felt like such a failure. And a lot of adrenaline right then. I wasn't like thinking like, oh my God, I'm a failure. I was just like glad to be alive right then.
Right.
But later exploring those feelings, it's like, man, I feel like a big failure. I feel like I let my family down. A lot of shame and stuff came up from that, as well as a lot of trauma just from that whole season.
Because you were how old? How old were you?
I was 23.
Yeah, 23 years old, $325,000 of debt, married, got a child on the way, and your boat turns over and sinks, and everything that you put your money into is now gone, and you're going to still have to pay it off.
Yeah,
or
and we had insurance.
Yeah.
Well, we had insurance, but it was way underinsured because that's like a fisherman's hack, is you underinsure your boat so you don't have to pay as much. And so that didn't pay off because we lost all our savings, pulled equity from our home and put it into that. And it just like fresh restart, like welcome to man, Daniel.
Yeah. Welcome to man. Here's the thing. These types of stories you think happen to somebody who's in their 30s, 40s, and you go, oh, okay, like, no, you were a kid. Like 23 is like being a kid. And you're full on adult, pulled your pants up and was like, I'm a big boy now, not wearing my Huggies, and I'm out here having to survive life. And there's a lot of learning that's happening really fast that most guys like they almost go their entire life before they even have to hit those types of trials and tribulations and have to sink into looking internally like, I feel like a failure. Like, how am I going to provide? What am I going to, like a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then it was all kind of, the trauma grew from that. I was stuck in fight or flight after that, like rolling the boat. After that, I would get up, just snap awake in the middle of the night thinking the hotel room was rolling or something was wrong. And I'd wake up all of a sudden. I'm just like looking out a window and still partially out of it, kind of dreaming, but totally like trying to get out the window or something, then fully awake. And I'm like, what am I doing? But I had like that solid for like 2 weeks. And all this time I'm trying to deal with the boat and like deal with the wreckage company that's trying to get it out of the water. And my wife's like about to have a baby any day, which I like. I'm not a big birth fan myself. Like when I was a little kid, I saw a horse give birth and I threw up. So I was like, I didn't know what to expect for this human birth. I'd never been a part of one. And it felt pretty scary for me especially after what I'd just been through and being traumatized. So then Sammy
birth was as bad as a shipwreck.
Yeah. Yeah. So then Sammy does have our baby and I'm like, all right, good job, babe. I'm heading back out because I got to go finish the season because I leased another boat.
Right. So I got to save us.
I got to try to make something back. So we're just not in like $100,000 in debt. And so I actually bought another boat, finished out the season. And then right when the season was done, Sammy started going to postpartum psychosis just because like the newborn stuff took such a toll on her body. She quit sleeping for like weeks and then all of a sudden missing sleep altogether and went to psychosis. And that's when it really triggered me into fight or flight. And I realized like, man, it felt like something was really wrong with me then.
That was super scary too, because Sammy wouldn't even recognize you at times.
Yeah. Wow. I remember one time she came down from the room and we tried to do the best we knew to get her help, but they ended up giving her like drugs that made it worse and weren't helping her sleep. Mm-hmm. So they gave her Ambien or something and it just made her go like deeper into psychosis. And I remember one time she came downstairs and she was just like blankly staring at the wall. Mm-hmm. And that's when we took her to the ER and she didn't recognize me or the baby or have any idea of anything. So it was it was very scary.
Super scary.
Which is a side note, Robbie, before you jump in there, you might have some more to say on that. One of the things that I value about you guys, and one of the things that I think gives us as humans, how do I put it, a sense of equity in what we have to say is when we've gone through suffering and tragedy and come out on the other side of it, where we've actually faced something. A lot of people have opinions and inputs about things in life, but they've never actually had to take a stand, fight for their family, go through tragedy, loss, those types of sufferings and things, and they think they have something to say. They really don't. It's not until you've actually had to go through something that it either it either brings you into a sense of manhood, adulthood, or it breaks you and you shut down altogether. But one of the things I've watched you guys do is like it's actually brought something out of you that's been really cool. Robbie, I think you were going to say something there. Maybe I missed
it. He was involved in that season of our life too. Our whole family was, and he was just, I think, reinforcing how scary it was. Just kind of traumatic for the whole family, us going through that experience.
Well, then Robbie, you had your boat and stuff. How did you guys come together as far as working together, and what was that like?
Yeah. So around a similar time, I guess I was maybe he rolled the boat, and then actually, it took us a couple of years to really get off and fully do our own thing. I think he fished for his dad for a little bit. And so I had my boat for a couple of years now, and it's getting harder and harder to leave the family. And especially since Daniel had kind of rolled his boat. And, I had a love-hate relationship with fishing. I think it taught me a lot of really cool values just around being innovative and, being a hard worker. You kind of just got to figure things out when you're out on a small boat in the middle of the ocean. So there was a lot of cool things. And I think even Daniel would say that, outside of the shipwreck, kind of growing up in that environment did provide a lot of good things for his life. So I didn't grow up doing it. And so I was experiencing a lot of that for the first time. But I do remember, a couple years in, 2 or 3 years in, it was toward the end of the season and we were just grinding away. And you're always like hoping that something happens that will like end your season. Like either the companies that are buying your fish will not buy fish, or you get this massive breakdown just so you can go home and call it
you're just so exhausted over it.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so the openers were working to where we were like fishing all night. And that's kind of how fishing works. It's very competitive. There's not many guarantees. You don't know if you're going to catch fish. You don't know if the fish are going to show up. You don't know if you're going to get paid a fair price or anything. So you just try to make as much as you can out of any hour that you have. And so if it's open for, an 84-hour period, you're going to fish as much as you can. And so that's like 21 hours, 22 hours a day, maybe take a nap and just keep fishing. So it was the middle of the night and we were out there. The weather was crappy. It was raining. We were getting slapped around and I looked off. There was a boat fishing next to me and it was this old man all by himself. He had, he was drinking something. He was self-medicating. I was like, dude, I just don't want that to be me. And that was kind of my aha moment that,
wow,
there was a lot of really cool things about fishing, but I knew it wasn't going to work for me long-term or even for this new season of my life where I'm learning to, have a family and be a father and a husband. And so around that same time, me and Daniel were at least curious about other ways of doing life and kind of coming from a pretty small perspective. There's not a ton of diversity in the different ways you can make money in Alaska or in Homer, Alaska. But we were starting to kind of branch out and Daniel read the book, Think and Grow Rich. And that really just kind of like opened up his vision for life and his vision for a career and a way to make money and really just a way to move forward. And he shared that book with me and we were pretty close friends at this time, doing a lot of adventures and play together. And, one thing we always did on the boats is we always loved having like a video camera with us and making these fun videos of like extreme weather or animal encounters. I think there's videos of like Daniel getting attacked by a sea lion, or standing on icebergs and like all this crazy stuff. So it was really fun. We liked making videos. So well, let's just start a video production company and see what happens. And that kind of was the beginning of our journey together and kind of the foundation of what's now a pretty decent sized marketing company. What else do you want to know about it? Kind of how we move forward from there? Or
yeah, I love it. Well, you guys ended up stepping into that and then it evolved out of a video company suddenly. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So we both felt a little bit beat up after our experiences fishing. And like you said, we're pretty young, pretty new into the world and just felt like a lot of things have happened. And one thing I like about this conversation is sometimes we're telling our story on like to somebody who's really interested in business, but you're really interested in all of us and our whole life. And my point in saying, sorry, I was completely out of brain fart. It was just like, we're not wanting to just like figure out how to grow a business or become rich. We're actually trying to figure out, how to be there for our families, be there for our wives, and trying to figure out not only how to make a successful business, but how to put our lives in order and how to build something that's going to be worth living. And so when we left the commercial fishing scene, we kind of had some things that we knew were non-negotiables for us, because we didn't want to like leave a toxic lifestyle and then go recreate it somewhere else. So when we started our business, we had all these things where we're entering into a business culture where it's actually not a ton different from like the commercial fishing industry. A lot of the narrative you hear is like, you got to go out and just grind, hustle.
It's feast or famine. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, give it your all. Like, and if you're not making money, don't go to sleep and like all this stuff. So we're like, we kind of had it in our heads that that's not what we wanted to do. And so we've set very rigid parameters on what we were even going to give to the business. And so we'd start at 9, we'd stop at 5, we'd make sure we'd be home for dinner. And we're just trying to figure out how to enjoy life. And this, I'd say like this whole first year was, us learning a lot of lessons and us really learning what we valued, but there's just a lot of pain and suffering in it too.
Yeah.
As a startup company, we had enough like little wins here and there to keep us going. But eventually we hired a full-time employee. We paid him like a $50,000 salary, which took up all the net profit in the business. So we went a whole year without any income.
Wow.
We were kind of like supplementing it with a fishing trip here or there, or a construction problem here and there. We were trying to juggle this. And there's so many times where, our wives would ask us, what are we going to make this month? Was a common question, because we'd look at our income, we'd look at our expenses, and, maybe try and figure out a way to pay ourselves like a couple $100. And it just never worked out. And so it was always this thing where we're like, it was really, really hard to say we're not getting paid, but I do believe it's going to work out one day.
I want to say too, there was something deep down inside both of us where we just felt like that's what we needed to be doing. We had such a strong gut feeling or intuition or call from the universe, as some people would call it, or call from God, that we knew this is what we wanted to be doing. And so even though we weren't making money, we knew we were progressing towards something bigger to what
we felt a yes.
We felt this giant yes, that we didn't know what tomorrow would look like. We didn't know if we were going to be able to pay for expenses that month, but we knew it was all building something that we really wanted to create freedom for ourselves and our families. And something else that I just want to say real quick too is when we first read the book Think and Grow Rich, that just changed our perspective on what was possible for us, because we grew up fishing. We're like, that's all we know how to do. That's all I can do. But then reading that shifted my perspective of like, actually, you can choose what you want to do, and opportunities and things will fall into place, and there'll be stepping stones to get to the next level. You just got to say yes and start doing that and start believing in it. And so that totally changed the whole trajectory, how we thought about our business, which has actually affected like every area of our lives, is having vision for what we think is possible and then incrementally taking steps towards it.
Yeah.
I want to add, go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
I was just going to continue on with the story.
I wanted to add something just super fast. One of the things you were making mention, so everyone who's listening right now, this is part of the crux of why I'm bringing these guys on, is they, especially as men, grow up in an environment that says just work super hard and then get trapped in just working really, really hard. And I believe that set a foundation for you guys. I think that working hard is a really big deal, and I think that that's what makes people successful. So one side of the coin, that is such a gift, because there's a whole there's a lot of people out there that don't believe in actually grinding and sweating and everything else that you have to do to make something happen. But then you also came out of an environment that said, this is all it is. This is all we know. This is all we'll do. Just work really hard, survive every day. And you start having those epiphanies from reading Think and Grow Rich and other things inside of your life, even your relationship to God, the connection internally that's like, oh yes, I know that there's got to be something more. And you're facing these things like literally both you guys could have given up at a young age and been like, I don't care, whatever, let's just move on and just get a basic job and just try and survive. But you're like, no, there has to be something more. How do we come out on the other side of this? And also there's a faithfulness. Like here you are as young guys and you're staying faithful to your wives and the kids that are on the way. And you're like, I want to provide for my family. I want to figure out how to do it different. I want to figure out how to set good boundaries so that I can actually enjoy my family, but also build something that has sustainability. So I love that about you guys. Robby, as you were saying, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the transition from the failing video production company to now what's a decent marketing company is we were creating these video assets for businesses, and then they would, wonder how to use them. And they'd say like, well, I'll put it on my website, I'll put it on my social media, and, my business is going to explode now because this is a really awesome video. And then the feedback we were getting is like, nobody's seen it. Like, we don't know what's happening. And so this idea of like trying to answer the question of how are we actually going to help these people? What impact is it actually having on their business? Kind of led us down the rabbit trail of learning how to not only make the video, but to then take that video and implement it into a marketing strategy. And we found out that there was more impact and meaning and money in actually providing the marketing service. And so that was kind of like what started us on the marketing company journey. And
I want to talk a little bit about that transition too, because we didn't make any money that whole first year. And then we're like, wow, we're going to transition to marketing. And we see a huge opportunity there. And we actually found a coach in the space that had already built a really successful agency. And so we got a credit card, I think, for the business, and it was $5,000. And she let us split it up into 2 payments over a few months to join her program. And we're like, all right, this has to work because we're just went into debt for this program, which we're already used to going into debt.
Yeah. You're like, I don't even care. Debt, whatever. Let's do it.
That's $5,000. But anyways, at the time it was a huge deal, and like had to talk it through our wives. Like, we don't have $5,000. We can't be spending this money. We need to be making money. But it was so significant because it accelerated our learning and our growth so much. Having a mentor, someone that had gone before us to lay it all out for us, that we've found value in mentors now for like every areas of our lives. But that was a big learning lesson for me was from the business perspective and how quickly we saw results of someone just coaching us through it.
This right here is something most people don't do. And if we're just having a conversation with some of the men, but we're having a conversation with men and women, but there's something about the element of a lot of times we as men feel like we have to figure out everything on our own. Right. And oftentimes it feels like we can feel fraudulent or stupid to ask for help, or especially it's hard to humble ourselves and say that and just be like, oh, I need help. And I'm going to pay for it. Like, you guys have positioned yourself in a very humble place with me, and then with all your other coaching processes that you've participated in. And that's something that's astounding that I think a lot of people could glean from, is like, oh no, it actually is a big deal to invest in myself, because every investment that I make inside of myself is going to pay dividends on the other side. Like, it will pay off.
100%.
Unless you were completely hustled.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for driving that home, dude. And thanks for all the work you've done with us too, and been a part of our massive journey of growth and personal development. Like, I can't say enough about that. Go ahead, Robby. Dude, I was about to say something so good, but it left.
I don't know if we've ever told you this, but one thing that we've always said is like, it's pretty easy to trace every breakthrough we've experienced in business back to a conversation we had with you, Justin. And I feel like us showing up to thrive in all areas of life and wanting to understand ourselves and even get healing from some of the terrible things we've gone through is actually what equipped us to be successful in our careers, and has actually like spun momentum into building what we now have, which is pretty exciting. But just like,
dude, even like in our, did I cut you off?
No, just wanted to say thank you to Justin.
Well, thank you guys for saying that. That's super kind of you. And really, that's the point of me having you on this podcast, is so that you could say those kind words about me. But I do, I feel very, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
I was going to say, even like breakthroughs, like in relationships and in marriage, there's always something that we're pulling from that then that's relevant for business. So I just love what you're saying of how it's relevant for every part of our lives. And this reminds me of like back when our first session we had, Justin, when I thought I was killing it, we're building this business, I'm crushing every area of life. And I remember on that, do you care if I share this real quick?
You can share whatever you want, bud.
All right. I remember on that call, you're like, you were picking up on some things I was saying, and you're like, Daniel, how would you feel if you looked up porn right now? And I started saying all these things. I was like, dude, I'd feel like a terrible husband. I'd feel like a bad father. I'd feel like a failure. I'd feel like a bad son. And you're just like, yeah. And I was like, oh, good. I'm performing well for Justin. He's agreeing with what I'm saying. This is all good stuff. And then at the end, it goes, sounds like you got a big shame monster in there, bud. And up until that point, I was totally ignorant of that. I had no idea that was going on. But I remember getting so much freedom, even just from that one thing. And it's been this whole journey since then. But just the awareness of it has helped me out in so many other areas of business, because I was so blinded by shame that I couldn't even get like feedback from anyone or even coaching, because I'd get defensive, right? Like, no, I'm not a bad person. So I just wanted to say that really quick.
That's really good. And a lot of people, like, that's something that we've dealt with both of you, Robby as well, is the shame monsters inside of your guys' lives. And a lot of people have such big shame monsters that it keeps them from ever growing or developing or actually achieving the goals or the dreams that they want inside of their life, because all of a sudden they're just melting down every time they get feedback or every time they need to ask for help. And a lot of guys, especially in the field of, again, it's people in general, but especially executives that I meet with, they deal with the fraudulent monster. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the fraudulent monster that you've had inside of business?
Yeah. I mean, dude, I still have it as we keep growing. And it's like, I don't know how to be a CEO, but it started even like just transitioning from commercial fishing to like client services. It's like two opposite worlds, from like being really, really good at commercial fishing and like kind of feeling on top to like, oh, I know nothing. And I'm having to come up from the bottom and get coaches and consultants and all these things. But even as we started growing the business or getting clients on, our first clients, I remember feeling like, I don't know if we're worthy to like accept money from people and make money for them and build a business. Like I remember a lot of those feelings, and even in conversations feeling kind of fraudulent, like, oh, there's probably so many more people that know a lot more about marketing, or, all those thoughts and feelings that come up with being fraudulent. But
yeah, what's funny about that too is when a lot of the things that made us feel fraudulent or the things we tried to hide, once we got past that and used it as a strength, actually ended up being so beneficial to us. For example, a perfect example is we would never want people to know we were a marketing company from Alaska.
Really? Because you're like, oh, it's Alaska. We're not from LA or something like that, or what?
Like,
totally.
Nobody's going to hire us or anything like that. And at some point, and it was probably, after a J session is what we call them. After we talked with Justin, it was like, dude, let's just own it. And we started using that in our marketing, and people just really latched on to that, to the authenticity of our story. And, we shared the story of us exiting the commercial fishing scene. We actually wrapped it all into our brand. And that's now why people come to us, is because of those real life experiences. And it was all these things that we were trying to hide because we thought if anybody knew that, they would think we were garbage,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say too.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, please.
I was just going to say, like, when I'm feeling fraudulent, it just makes me want to perform for everyone else and kind of stuff my own heart, my own emotions. And so it becomes really taxing, giving a piece of your identity to your employees, to your clients, to everyone else around you, just so you can not be fraudulent in their eyes. But really, it was this big performance act that was super taxing, basically.
How would you guys say that you've gotten out of performing? And has it been that you just felt fraudulent within the business world? Have you felt fraudulent as husbands or fraudulent as fathers, or what are your emotions, and felt inadequate in those areas? What's that like for you?
Well, I remember, so like Daniel had a story of one of the first big things you uncovered with him. I had a similar story where you were doing your investigation with me, and I was subtly trying to flex in our session of like how much I had done at such a young age. I was like, yeah, we just built our second house, run the commercial fishing operation. And I've always been like a pretty good performer. Like I said, I was kind of a golden boy, and, in a family that had, some level of dysfunction in it. I always kind of felt like the people who are off making messes are the ones that got the love and attention from my parents, just because it was like out of crisis and of need. And so I always felt like my needs got overlooked because I was like this golden boy performer. And in some ways I always felt like that served me well at a certain level. And anyways, I was bragging to you, and you're like, well, Robby, what would you think if you went out and didn't catch a single fish? And I was kind of telling you, like, I've always been a little bit intimidated of my father-in-law, Tom. He's like this local legend. He holds the world record herring set.
Really?
And
wow.
Just really respected here in Alaska as like a commercial fish and total manly man, outdoorsman. And, I've kind of felt like I was doing a decent job. Like, I'd just married his daughter, and I kind of jumped all in for the fishing thing, and we were doing pretty good. But you posed that question of like, well, what if you didn't? What would you feel? And then that really, for me, highlighted this need to be looked at as a high performer, or need to be looked at as someone who can accomplish things and do well. And so when that was stripped away and I was left with the feelings, it just revealed so much more just inadequacies in me that I just felt like broken on that spot. And it highlighted so much for me. And I guess now it still comes up here and there. And I think where it comes up for me now is, we pray into the vision we have for our company and what me and Daniel want to achieve together, and even how we want the company to impact the world. And right now we were just talking about this, is we feel like we're entering into a new season of more influence, more impact. And our whole thing is we want to empower and liberate people, hopefully through the services we provide, but definitely in the things we're saying and the values we carry into our company. And when we feel like, I think where it comes up for me is, I feel like God is blessing a new season for us. And he's saying like, I'm going to bless this. I'm going to bring more influence. I'm all of a sudden feeling like I'm alone in it, and I have to take ownership of it, and I have to make it all happen now on myself. Otherwise, I'm going to like totally screw up this thing that God just gave me. And now it's almost like a hard thing, because I want vision for what I'm doing, and I want to be excited, and I want, even prophetic words. But then as soon as I get it, I'm like, oh, I need to make this happen. And like, especially when there's a time frame on it. And that's when I really step outside of kind of the grace of like where I'm called to today, is I'm trying to make something happen that's really not even mine. And so, it's tricky. I think a lot of these things, we identified on day one with you, but now 3 years in, we're still just peeling off more and more layers of it.
What I love is that you guys haven't arrived somewhere like, oh, now we've arrived at the pinnacle, because there is no real pinnacle. It's, you've gotten more and more settled into your journey and learning how to just be present with, all right, this is the business that we have right now. And like you said, there's times where I get some vision for something, or I feel like there's a yes or a promise to something happening. And I have a tendency historically and currently to want to take control, but I'm learning how to not take control, and I'm learning how to just be present with what's right here and how to stay connected to myself. And do you feel that it's been really difficult to stay connected to yourselves? How do you guys get connected to yourselves throughout all this? Because you're taking on, look, again, how many kids do you have, Robby?
I have 4 kids.
And how many kids do you have, Daniel?
3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So being connected to myself and how easy is it? I'm learning to be more connected to myself. Cause like when we first started meeting, when I just rolled the boat, that was a few years after I rolled the boat. But when I first rolled the boat, I just stuffed all those emotions and feelings and just put them down and never dealt with them, which I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to be present, connected to myself, to my heart, until much later when we started meeting, and my body started completely shutting down from post-traumatic stress because of all the stuff I just left under the surface, and all of a sudden business and other small traumas in life were making it all come up. And I was like, I have to learn to deal with this. And so I actually had to learn to become present with myself, with my feelings, with my heart. And now it's like, it's part of my routine and rituals of how can I stay connected to myself and be present, even in the midst of hard times or in the midst of big opportunities. Like, what do I need to do to stay connected in the now and stay connected to my family? I'm not always doing it perfectly, but at least have some tools to prioritize it. And things like even Robby and I staying connected to each other and making sure, being the co-CEO role is almost like a marriage. It is. Right? Because you really have to be vulnerable. You have to be connected to your heart. Otherwise, if you're just saying one thing but feeling another, that's going to come out sideways somewhere down the line. And so we've really had to build in ways where we do that together. And that's something you've helped us with too, of creating that environment of what's your heart actually feeling? What do you actually want to do? And then going from there.
Well, it takes a lot of bravery what the two of you guys have done. I mean, you, again, at a young age, and again, this is part of why you're on here, is you got married, you took on big debt, you decided to show up for your family. I think that there's a world that's waiting for men to be brave, like actually show up and decide to be brave. And it doesn't always feel like we're being brave in the moment. It's just taking one moment after another at a time of looking at a fear face on and being like, I'm not going to let you dictate how I'm going to manage my future. You die, and you guys have chose to dive head first into those fears. And like, even when you had a failing video company, you're like, okay, we don't know what's going on. We just know we got a dream for something else. And it looks like we could try something over here. Let's try this too. Like, there's this tenacity or this grit that you guys have developed throughout your lives of not giving up. And it's very easy to just tap out and go, I'm not going to try and have any more vision, and I'm just going to get a basic job, which isn't bad, but just a job that just provides, and I'm not really involved in like directing my life. There's something that is required out of us if we want to truly direct our lives and see a story unfold that isn't just a mundane, I survived this earth experience, but I actually thrived. It takes some deliberate actions of being really brave, facing some fears. And I wanted to ask you, because I want to do a part 2 with you guys and go deeper into both your partnership and how you guys do that inside of the business, and some of the things that you've had to overcome, and think really stewarded being fathers and husbands. And I really think this is a good setup for that. But what's one major fear that you guys would have to say that together you've had to face and overcome and be brave at?
It's hard to put one down.
For me, it's kind of been a fear of abandonment or failure. And so we get super into something, super committed. And in this journey of him and I working together, there would be, you could almost look at it as there was several businesses that were started and failed, whether it was a certain approach we were trying or something like that, different ideas. And I turned 30 this year, and it just feels like we've been through a lot, both individually and together. But in that time, I got married. I now have 4 kids. We've actually had like 2 miscarriages. We've built and sold 2 houses and built a 3rd, and we're now living in it. We've had all these businesses that we've started and failed, and we have this one that we feel like is growing and flourishing and thriving. And there's just been a lot going on. And Daniel rolled the boat, and it just feels like we've been through a lot, especially when we start investigating all these things from our childhood that make me aware of why I have such a tendency to look at my life as I need to be a performer. But I guess in it, the fear that keeps coming up for me over and over is like, as our capacity grows and as blessing grows and our company grows, I'm always thinking like, you don't want it to fall apart. I guess
that is a huge fear that a lot of people experience when the goodness starts happening. What if it all falls apart?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's one of them. Or I feel like, what if God isn't going to bless it? And because now we're at a level where I feel like alone, I couldn't handle any of this. Like I couldn't handle it without Daniel. I couldn't handle it even without my talks with you or with my dependency on my higher power. Like I just feel so dependent that there's a certain level of like, if I was ever to be abandoned in this, it would be really hard. And I don't think it would be worth it. I think I probably would downsize my life and live a life that isn't as bold or as brave. And maybe I would go get a job and just like punch a clock somewhere, because it's been so rich. I think there's a certain fear of losing it all.
Well, it's interesting that in your fear also exposed something that, like you said, is really rich inside of your life, is the deep connection. Like part of the success in both of your guys' lives, like define the, I mean, the word can be defined in many ways, but even the financial success or the however people would view success is like, hey, I made money and it kept growing and building, and that's success. But that is all really dependent upon relationships and your ability to connect to people. I mean, you're sitting here saying, hey, my connection with my close friend and business partner, my connection with my coach, my connection with my spiritual higher power, God, like that, and probably your wives, whatever. But, it's the idea of connection with people is the thing that's actually holding you up and giving you the capacity to do so much more than we ever dreamed. And a lot of people live as though we're islands. And we don't realize how limiting that actually is when we create these islands for ourselves, and how the vulnerability, because you guys are deeply vulnerable. I mean, just the idea, like what you just said was a deeply vulnerable statement, man. Like, if all this disappeared, everything could really fall apart. If the people closest to me and some of that stuff were pulled out, like what's causing me to thrive is my vulnerability of allowing the support to come around me and rally around me inside of this. And so a lot of people are going to have to, if they want to create and write the story with their life that they want, they're going to have to learn how to vulnerably be connected and let people serve a part of their story.
Mm-hmm. One thing that's been really helpful, and that has encouraged me to be able to be more vulnerable, is just this idea that you and Abby always say, is that life is messy.
Yeah.
And, in this journey, there have been a lot of messes, and, finding support in that, and community in that, and even a good sense of humor in that has been really, really helpful.
So our business is successful because you're codependent on me. I'm just kidding, dude. I think, dude, a lot of the same things for me, which is cool because we're able to dialogue about them and help each other through them. But the abandonment one is really big because I think that's what I felt when I rolled the boat. I was like, I'm all alone to figure this out.
Yeah.
When you get down to the root of what you're actually feeling. And then bringing that into now, of like back then, like when we just started the business and you have $100,000 of expenses a year, like that's not bad. You can go get a job and like pay for that. But now we have $6 million in yearly expenses.
Yeah.
It's like, we can't do that alone, right? And so it's brought me to a whole new level of like, all right, I'm not alone in this. I'm not abandoned. It's actually a good God that loves me, who's present with me in this moment. Even if the business does go away and I lose Robby and Justin quits talking to me, I'm still not going to be alone. I'm going to have people. My family's still going to love me. God's still going to love me. He'll bring other people into my life that will support me. So just starting to get to that place has been super helpful for me, of like knowing at the end of the day, no matter what happens in business, I'm not going to be alone and abandoned.
Well, and that's the cool thing, is as we grow older and we actually face things that are really scary and things don't work out, and then they do work out, and you have the losses, but the losses turn into open doors to something greater. you start building an actual life history where you're like, no, the truth is when I face my greatest fears, no matter what it costs me, it turns out good for me. It turns out me growing, being more connected to people around me. It turns into me learning something about the world. It turns into the opportunities that I didn't know even existed. Like you in fishing, if your fishing boat hadn't have turned over, there's no way you'd just be randomly just like, oh, you know what? I should start a marketing company because I have so much experience in that.
Totally.
So, but
yeah, I know. And that turned out to be, you're right, like one of the biggest gifts in my life. What was so traumatic and scary for our family, that whole season has turned out to be one of the biggest gifts because I got to go internally and find out and pluck out all those deepest fears that were driving how I thought to now I'm a completely different person with a whole new value on life and myself. So yeah, you're totally right in that. Yeah.
And now you have the history. Like again, once we produce a history, then we create confidence because our history tells like when like people can use their history to make them very unconfident or they can actually push in a certain way. There's a specific way you've approached your history and kept facing your fears and overcoming things and not giving up that created a history that said, no, I can be confident and I'm going to be taken care of. Even if this all falls apart, it's going to be taken care of. Yeah, it's super cool. Well, guys, I really appreciate you coming on today. We're going to do part 2 next week for all of our listeners and go into some of those more things. We're going to talk about vision because vision is something that you guys have like cultivated in an amazing way for all parts of your life. And it's what's opened so many doors for all the expansion that you guys have done. And you guys you're never lacking vision. You're actually having to try to catch up to all the vision you're constantly having. Most people are like, I don't even know what I want to eat for dinner tonight. You guys are like, 10 years from now, this is what our life's going to be. And I love that because you really start shattering boxes. So many people live with these boxes around their lives and you've applied it to your families and how you want to live your life specifically in a way that's not your business dominating you, but it's actually healthy boundaries in every place. And there's like a whole healthy ecosystem that you guys are on your way to creating. And I'm so proud of what you guys have done with that. And we're going to get into that in the next episode. So any final things you have to say?
Dude, thanks so much for having us on. Really enjoyed it today. And I'm really looking forward for part 2.
Yeah, guys. And also, if they want to find out, if anyone wants to even look into your services, where would they find out more about you?
Yeah, they can just go to shopanova.com. And from there, they can learn more information, check out our Instagram. We have an e-commerce growth show. If you do have an e-commerce business, you can watch some episodes or reach out to us from our website.
And then you have a podcast. What's that called?
That's the Ecom Growth Show.
That's that. Yeah. Sorry. That's the Ecom Growth Show. It's also a podcast, but it's also video
and then podcasts that they can check out on iTunes.
And we give growth tips on there.
What's your growth tip? Anyways, well, guys, anyone who listened to this today that got something out of it and is wanting to get inspired further, rate, review, subscribe, and share because next week's going to be a really inspiring conversation as well. So, again, thanks for joining us and peace out. Goodbye.